Chances are, if you're watching this video, you've just picked up a PSVR2 for Black Friday. The discount was very, very deep of a sale, and you might be wondering what games are perfect for you as a brand new VR player, or as somebody that wants to see the incredible sights of PSVR2. Well, that's exactly what I'm here to tell you about today, from games that will not trigger your motion sickness, hopefully, to games that might do but are worth it and everything in between. I'm here to guide you through a couple of my picks between a few different genres of what I would start with if I just got a PSVR2 for the first time. Before we jump in though, only 25% you are subscribed, so if you feel like subscribing to the channel, please feel free to do so for everything PSVR2 and VR related. Thank you to our patrons and members for bringing this content to you as well. With that being said, let's get into it. Let's kick things off with a visual showcase. If you'd like to see the best visuals that PSVR2 has to offer and the most clarity that PSVR2 has to offer, I would recommend starting with the Red Matter games. If you want to jump straight to the best looking VR games on the platform, and also a game that has quite an easy movement scheme and will ease you into VR controls quite well, I'd say start with Red Matter 2, although if you want to experience the games back to back, they can be bought in a bundle, so you can start with Red Matter 1 if you'd like. However, I jumped into 2 without any previous knowledge of 1, and I still enjoyed it as a story. And it's a game that won't throw you around and make you feel too sick, and will genuinely show you some of the best sights PSVR2 has to offer. If you're a sci-fi or puzzle fan as well, then that is an extra bonus because the puzzles in the game aren't too hard but do keep you thinking a bit, but that is the main gameplay loop, is puzzle solving throughout Red Matter 2 and 1, and the sci-fi aesthetic and sights of both games will honestly leave your jaw on the floor. So Red Matter 1 and 2 I would recommend for you sci-fi fans who don't want anything too locomotion intensive just yet, but want to see some amazing sights. They both run unreprojected at 90 FPS, so a super smooth experience, so I'd recommend them. Another genre of game that people really love to start out with, and I'll recommend a couple here, are beat games. Of course, we have Beat Saber, which is the classic, everybody knows Beat Saber. The upside to that is that there's quite a bit of content out the gate for your normal price of entry, and then if you want to, you can pay extra money to get actual licensed songs from artists like Imagine Dragons, Billie Eilish, and Linkin Park. However, there are some other alternatives to beat games that you might want to try out. Synth Riders is another one that has a bit of an alternative music take, and the gameplay loop is a little different but really satisfying, and it feels a bit more like dancing than Beat Saber does. Trombone Champ is also one that just came out and I just reviewed. That requires you to play an actual instrument, in this case a trombone, and leans a bit more into the humour and the funny side. It is an incredibly polished game and a load of fun though, so if you're interested in beat games, those are a couple that I'd recommend off the start. Next up, I'll recommend a personal favourite of mine, which is Kayak VR Mirage. Some people will say this kayaking sim is a bit of a tech demo. I do sort of agree with them because ultimately it is just kind of a nice visual showcase and the gameplay is pretty fun kayaking around. But if you don't enjoy being in these virtual environments, then you might get a bit bored after not too long. However, I revisit Kayak VR all the time, and it was one of my first PSVR2 games, and it looks absolutely jaw-dropping. There is a PS5 Pro patch for it as well, which increases resolution by a fair bit, but by no means is the base PS5 resolution bad. It is still one of the best looking games on the platform. It also now has DLC and a couple more updates on the way, so if you end up buying the game and you like what you see, you can go buy the Soka Valley DLC and head down some whitewater rapids. With a lovely soundtrack and some of the coolest locations I've ever seen in a VR, I just find Kayak an absolutely incredible game because I can jump in and visit Australia, Costa Rica or Antarctica whenever I want. The normal levels are also pretty easy on the locomotion side of things. I would stay away from jumping into the stormy levels or jumping into Soka Valley immediately if you do buy that DLC, because that is a little more intensive, and I do think it can make you quite motion sick if you've not really experienced it before. Some of the more flat levels though, like Costa Rica and Antarctica, I would say are pretty perfect for getting your VR legs in a bit. Another plus is if you got a friend on PC VR or PSVR2 with the game, you can jump in 2-player co-op multiplayer to explore together if you'd like to. But what if you've just picked up a PSVR2 on Black Friday and you're worried about scratching your lenses? Well, that's when today's sponsor, VR Rock, comes in. VR Rock are a prescription lens maker for PSVR2 and other VR headsets, and each of their custom lenses can be adjusted with either blue light filters or anti-glare filters if you like them, and are adjusted exactly to your prescription. There are magnetic and non-magnetic options, and I use these lenses every single day on my PSVR2 just to protect them. I don't need glasses, but I'd rather scratch a £30 or £50 pair of lenses on top of my PSVR2 lenses than the actual PSVR2 ones that will cost me £500 to get a new headset. And if you're watching this on December 2nd when it comes out, the Black Friday sale ends today, so act fast. You can use my code JammyHero15 to get 15% off in this limited period, but if you're watching after December 2nd, you're not out of luck. You can just use the code JammyHero in the link in the description to get 10% off anyway. Go protect your PSVR2, And check out the sponsor of today's video, VR Rock, and thank you to them for sponsoring today's video. Let's get back to the games. Next up are a couple of games that might make you a little bit more motion sick, but are still worth trying out either for their quality or for a couple of other benefits. This game has been talked about so much that I might not even need to give it an introduction. It's the best shooter on PSVR2, and it's also a great social game. If you're looking for people to meet, granted you may have to put up some lobbies with some younger kids who will screech at you, but despite that, this is where I met most of the people that I play PSVR2 with whenever we jump in for a co-op session on any game. It's an underrated social experience, and strapped on top of that, it's a very fun shooter, so give it a go. Next, I'll bundle together a bunch of the AAA games. Horizon Call the Mountain, Resi 8, Resi 4, and GT7 are all worth checking out if you've got your VR legs a little bit. They are some of the best quality that PS5 and PSVR2 has to offer. Horizon Call the Mountain is probably the game that is the most new user-friendly, as it has quite a lot of options for eliminating motion sickness, and is designed to be one of your first VR games, although I've heard some people still get motion sick from it, so just be careful. Resi 8 and 4 are a lot more motion sick inducing for new players, as the cutscenes kind of throw you around a bit, and the gameplay involves quite a bit of movement. GT7 on the other hand can be a little bit hit or miss in terms of motion sickness. It's one of my favourite PSVR2 games, and if you're a driving enthusiast you'll absolutely love it, and maybe the fact that you're sitting down will help with motion sickness and make it feel like you're just driving a car, which should calm your brain down a little bit. But all those picks are worth checking out. Penultimately, there are two horror games that I'd throw in here for you to check out, and both are either seated or stationary. First up, FNAF Help Wanted 1 and 2 are both examples of standing stationary PSVR2 games that may appeal to horror fans. I think this might be one of the only PSVR2 games, aside from Job Simulator, that I've put people on and it's never made them motion sick at all. And that's just because they're simply standing in one location. Five Nights at Freddy's involves you either standing there performing maintenance on one of the animatronics in the game, or defending from animatronics by shutting doors and managing power from a certain location, and that means you're not moving around at all. If you're a horror fan as well, there's a couple of spooky moments and jump scares to be had in these games, and especially if you've got other friends and family visiting, and you'd like them to try out the PSVR2 and want to give them a good scare, Help Wanted 1 rather than 2 is probably the way to go here. If you want to be seated and have a horror experience, Switchback VR will be a little bit more motion sick inducing because it is a roller coaster game, but it also is a game where again you don't have to move using a joystick, which might throw your brain off a little bit. Since launch it's been polished up, it's had a horde mode added and it looks great now. I still personally loved it when it came out, and if you're a fan of Supermassive's The Dark Pictures series, there'll be a lot of recognizable locations in this one. But the main thing for you guys who are starting out with the PSVR2 is that the chance of it making you throw up immediately isn't too high. Although it is a roller coaster sim, it isn't constantly throwing you around on the tracks, and to be honest, it's a fairly tame one in terms of the track layouts. You're not going to have any loop-the-loops or anything like that, but there is a little bit of motion in there. If you're avoiding that completely, then maybe give it a miss. But I'd recommend it to you horror fans, especially fans of Supermassive games. And finally, a bit of an out there pick is Stellaris Ghost Signal. Whether you're a fan of the flat screen Stellaris games or not, Ghost Signal is a fantastic roguelike set in that universe. For any of you sci-fi fans or people that want to play seated and again, not really move much, this game involves you traveling from point to point in a third person point of view, where from a camera perspective, you're just kind of sat there in space, you're never really moving, and you're just kind of fading out from one place to the next, while you explore the galaxy with your small ship, fighting enemies and settling diplomatic disputes. It's got a lot of DNA from the flat screen Stellaris games, but with its own spin on it, and I really loved Ghost Signal, and it'll be a very easy one for anybody who wants to ease themselves into VR. Well, those are my picks for new PSVR users who picked them up during Black Friday. I do actually have a video on the best accessories to pick up, and a couple of other recommendations that I'll link in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you to our patrons and YouTube members who are on screen again right now. If there are any other games you'd like to recommend, please put them in the comments. There are some other PSVR2 users which I'm sure will have some great recommendations for games, and hopefully there'll be a couple of those in the comment section for you guys. Thank you to VR Rock for being the paid partner of today's video yet again. Once more, that is Jammy Hero 15 for 15% off. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.